Hey, howdy ho, everybody! Welcome back to another wonderful week on the Ghastly Ghost Birds channel. I am Postmortem Nightshade, one half of your wonderful, charming, amazing Ghastly Ghost Birds, and joining me this evening is.
Solatro! How's it going?
Woohoo! Woo! Welcome back, everybody. We are so excited to be joining you in the second week of February, if you can believe it or not. And we are moving right along here into Phase 4 of Marvel. If you don't know, last week we talked about Phase 3, and the week before we delved into Phase 1 and 2, preparing for Avengers Doomsday. Full disclaimer right up front, we are casual fans of Marvel, so we talk about the properties that we've seen, but if you are wanting nitty gritty thoughts, then we are preparing a series of videos about the DC animated properties, so get excited for that if that's a property or franchise you enjoy. But moving right along here into Phase 4 of Marvel and the MCU, Slothro, what are your thoughts on Phase 4 as a whole?
So, my overall thoughts on this phase are unfortunately, they're kind of neutral compared to, I guess, the absolute high that we had in the last phase. So, the last phase we had, Infinity War, Endgame, like we talked about last time, like Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther. We had a lot of really good movies in the last phase. And so, I think I probably knew deep down that it would probably not ever get as high as that because my expectations after that point were so high. But what kind of followed this phase was this is around the time, I guess it has some context that is needed. This phase came out around the time that COVID started. And so a lot of the properties and the film adaptations and making of producing a film was not very easy for a little while. And so unfortunately, a lot of this phase and the next phase that we're in Marvel all suffer from this kind of incident of COVID. And so overall, though, I think there are some really good properties still, even though it was during a hard time. There's a few that stick out to me a lot, and I know that there's a few that probably stick out to you that we'll discuss more. But I think overall, I would say I have a pretty neutral stance on Phase 4 overall.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that they're of the I guess phases that people were most disappointed with. I would say there was a little bit less disappointment regarding phase 4, especially looking back now as we're into phase 5 and there's been some definitely big disappointments there, but I actually would think, some people may agree, disagree, let me know in the comments. I think phase 4 was actually pretty okay. Like Sothro said, pretty impossible task to follow up everything that happened in phase 3. But yeah, I think we'll be discussing some of our highlights of phase 4 here because there are definitely actually quite a few for me. So, getting started right at the top here, the first property we'll be discussing from phase 4 is WandaVision. So, what are your feelings about WandaVision, Slothro?
So for me, I was actually really excited because this was the first TV show that was announced to be following the Marvel properties after Phase 3. And so, me personally, especially after watching the trailers for this show, I was really excited because the beginning of it takes a unique perspective, kind of like for those who don't know, there are video trends on, let's say, YouTube, like analog horror, which I know is a totally different subject, but they kind of go that similar vein to where they're trying to capture a certain area or period of time in the art of film, like modern film. And so WandaVision is trying to take that super old classic black and white like rom-com TV show aesthetic for a part of the series, and then it builds on and goes through time until it is what we normally know as like a Marvel movie. And so I think for that alone, I think they did a pretty good job for like transitioning through those for the first few episodes. I really enjoyed, of course, Scarlet Witch's portrayal. I enjoyed Vision's portrayal. I think they both did a really good job overall in this product. There were definitely some parts of the story that I wasn't. It didn't really click for me, but overall, I think the overall TV show I think it was an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I also liked WandaVision. I actually thought it was pretty strong coming out of Endgame, especially given what happens between Wanda and Vision because of Thanos. So I really appreciated they really do like a lot more exploration of a Wanda kind of becomes a very morally ambiguous character, and they just really try to expound on how deeply trauma can affect people. And while this is definitely not an uncommon theme now, especially if you're familiar with the modern twist in the horror genre, where you have like elevated horror. Grief and trauma are definitely big themes there. But when this show came out, that wasn't super on the forefront, or especially not in superhero movies. So the fact that they were exploring that in the superhero genre was really cool, actually showing the devastating impacts that the lifestyle of being superhero has on the characters. Like Slothro said, I really liked the vintage TV show sitcom aesthetic. I thought it was really cool. Again, agreeing with Slothro, Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, very good as Wanda and Vision. And I particularly liked Catherine Hahn, who plays the villain in WandaVision. Spoiler alert. I know this show, like Sato said, has been out for quite a while, but all of our shows have spoilers, so just be aware of that going forward. But yes, Catherine Hahn is the villain. She plays Agatha. Love her, love her, love her. I always love a villain with a penchant for a cute little animal sidekick, and she has a cute little pet rabbit, which rabbits are personally my favorite. So loved that. I thought she was a deliciously fun villain that was just having a great time. And yeah, she's awesome. But yeah, I enjoyed the mystery element. I like trying to figure out, initially they don't really tell you what's going on with WandaVision or what's going on with the town that they're living in. So that was cool. All in all, not a bad way to go into the next phase after Endgame, I thought.
I definitely agree with that. It was a pretty good start. Kind of leading into the next property, this is the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show. So this one and the next one were all kind of TV shows that came out basically one after another before the next official movie came out. And so Falcon and the Winter Soldier is about Falcon, of course, and the Winter Soldier. It's about Bucky and
Sam Wilson.
Sam Wilson, yeah. So Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes. It follows them after, the events of Endgame. There is a lot of stuff going on in the world still, and it is up to them. They kind of work as a team for the whole show. I really enjoy the main characters. I especially like them, in Captain America, Winter Soldier. I think they did a really good job there. I think overall their performance was pretty good. This show isn't fully what I hoped it would be, but I still think that there were aspects of it that were all right. So I would say it isn't I personally didn't enjoy it as much as WandaVision, but there were still aspects of it that were fine.
No, those are great thoughts, Slothro. And I definitely want to leave more of the conversation about Falcon and the Winter Soldier to you, just because I know this is so terrible. I kind of got bored with this series, and it really makes it hard for me to finish a TV show if I get bored. I know, for better or worse, yeah, judge me, I know. I do try to finish TV shows. I just couldn't quite finish this one. It kind of lost me about halfway through. And so I knew there was just going to be so much content to keep up with. So I was just hoping that I could kind of put the clues together about what had happened later on. I really do like Bucky. I do like Sam Wilson. I think Sam Wilson is actually a really great person to take over the mantle of Captain America. I think that he's just a really strong character. I have been kind of disappointed, spoilers for a little bit of my thoughts about later properties with him in it. I feel like the writing, they just haven't figured out how to write Sam Wilson. He's just got so much potential, and I think he's such a great Captain America. I just wish that they would give him better written stories to really give him the chance to shine. And so I kind of feel a little bit about Captain America, the current iteration, a little bit how I felt about Spider-Man when he was introduced into the MCU, where it kind of feels like they didn't know how to write him. And so they kind of make him take a little bit of a back seat, or they're just really not sure how to execute on a good script. So I just think he's a really great Captain America, and I hope that they give him a better chance to shine in like Doomsday and Secret Wars. But I don't know. What did you think, Slothro?
I honestly hope so too. I agree with you fully. I feel like the writing was just not as strong as it could have been. I definitely think that I really enjoy him as an actor. He does all of them do a really good job acting, and there is no issue on that front. I just think, like you said, as a story, it just wasn't as engaging, and it didn't really keep my attention as much throughout the whole show. I think overall, it was just it's kind of like a graph, after phase 3, we just kind of slowly have this kind of like very gradual taper to not like anything bad, but it just doesn't hit that same high, at least like fully like wrapped around like a full completed product. And so I feel like, especially with these 3 shows, they were very hit or miss. But I still think this one had some good aspects to it. It just probably wasn't my favorite of this phase, honestly.
Yeah, and, the actor you're thinking of is Anthony Mackie. I think that Anthony Mackie definitely has the ability and the skills to carry on the mantle of Captain America, and I really hope that the writing team can just get it together to give him some strong material to let him shine as Captain America. But after, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the next one that we wanted to talk about was Loki season 1, and so this is very interesting because Loki was always a side character, and I was very interested to see how they would bring him to the forefront and give him his own show. What were your thoughts on season 1 for Loki, Slothro?
Okay, so I think initial thoughts going in and watching it, I wasn't the biggest fan of the show. Post watching it afterwards, like being able to kind of ruminate and think about the show, I think it's another alright show. I think there's lots of aspects to it that are interesting, especially like what you said. They're trying to convert a side character that we see Loki into the main character, and they're trying to include this whole extra element into the universe with the I think they're called the TVA, and so they have like the ability to travel through time and control different time streams, and so they become a pretty big role in this phase and the next phase of Marvel. And I think overall, there's definitely some interesting story bits, especially with Loki, kind of exploring a little bit of his mentality in terms of like why he is the way he is, and aspects like that. I think it was pretty good. There were definitely some story beats that I was kind of confused on, but I think it was really cool kind of getting to see that the different kind of time stream element and then kind of seeing it culminate at the end to where something big and impactful happens with the rifting apart. And because all of these shows are canon to the movies, this actually affects the movies going forward after this season. So I think for what it does, I think it does a pretty decent job.
For sure, I agree. I really enjoyed this first season. I've heard the second season is also strong. It's definitely on my list. I enjoy the humor that they employ with him, and he definitely is reminiscent of kind of those 90s Disney villains that were so popular back in the day. So I agree with Slothra. I like the introduction of the TVA. I like they went again with a very vintage looking aesthetic for the TVA, which I thought was cool. I appreciated. I thought it was pretty clean cut, easy to follow story. It was a good show. And let me say for the record, I do not agree one bit with Quentin Tarantino. In a recent interview, if you're unaware, where he criticized many actors in a not very kind way, and one of those actors that he criticized was Owen Wilson, and I was quite shocked by that because I actually really enjoyed Owen Wilson's character in Loki season 1, and he actually became one of the big reasons why I enjoyed the show so much. I just really love how Owen Wilson played the character, and he was able to hold his own, even while being in scenes with such a strong character that Tom Hiddleston's Loki is. I just really thought he brought something really special to the show, and so I think Owen Wilson, is a great actor, and I thought he did an especially good job in Loki season 1.
Yeah. And then this leads actually into the first official movie of Phase 4. So we kind of had a whole burst of TV shows, and now we're finally at our first movie. And it was definitely a movie, that is for sure. It is Black Widow. For me, this is definitely a movie that exists within Marvel. I think there was aspects of this film that was very interesting. It was kind of cool getting to see the origins of Black Widow put to screen. I think that was very interesting getting to see that kind of like introductions to her past. And I also really enjoyed the character dynamic between her and her younger sister. I think that was executed very well. There was parts of this movie that I thought probably wasn't the most Marvel it could have been. I think one example for me is, like we said, spoilers, at the end of the movie, the way the villain dies, it almost comes off as like comedic, which is very kind of odd for how all the villains up to this point have like fallen. Because you go from something as intense as like Thanos and that whole story to the comical way that this guy dies. And it was just a very different like pace. And so overall, I think Black Widow, it was an all right movie. It's definitely, I don't know. I guess it's just like a middle burger for me. It's just kind of mid.
Yeah, definitely agree there, Slothro. This was kind of a disappointment, I'm not gonna lie. I did have things I liked about this movie. I liked the introduction of Yelena and the Red Guardian. I especially like that they actually did something with those characters they introduced in Black Widow later on in Thunderbolts. So yeah, I liked them. I thought they were funny enough. I do think this movie kind of suffers from the reliance or heavily leaning on this kind of Marvel sense of humor that definitely starts to get overused in Phase 4. And this was actually one of the first movies after Endgame where, and even in comparison to the TV shows, which usually have to spread their effects budget a lot wider, I felt like the effects really started to slip with Black Widow. I felt like the CGI was very fake and plasticky looking, and it felt like it was on a green screen.
I was just agreeing with you. That was the part I was going to talk about, the visual effects. Like learning about film in school and college, and then watching this film, I think just kind of opened my eyes to kind of like noticing small things in the visual effects. And for me, I hate to say it, but there were some scenes that low-key felt like they took a clip from like YouTube green screen explosions and just kind of threw them in there. And it just gave me a very like a vintage early 2000s slash like YouTube edit kind of vibe. And I agree with you. It definitely had like TV show looking graphics, which I know it didn't have the biggest budget, but I guess I'm just not fully aware of why they couldn't just use prior assets that they used in prior movies and incorporate them somehow in a different way into this. But I don't know. Either way, the visuals, I agree with you, are not. They kind of fall hard starting at this point.
Yeah, and you know what's disappointing, Slothro? I was curious when you said about the budget. It looks like Black Widow's reported budget was actually $288 million, which is shocking. I mean, with what you get from the visual effects is just, I mean, I was baffled by the visual effects, to say the least. And you know, for me, the plot was just not that memorable, especially, you know, again, with the TV shows, the effects look better, and I could still remember the plot of Loki season 1 and WandaVision, and it's this many years later, and I feel like the only memorable thing about Black Widow was that the character dies at the end. So I just, overall, I agree with Slothro. Not my favorite. I was really kind of disappointed by this film, to be honest.
Yeah. I will say though, I think honestly, kind of a spoiler, this next film we'll talk about is among my top 2 favorites of this phase. This is Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings. So I didn't know very much about this Marvel character since like Postmortem said, we are very versed in DC. So when watching this movie or like initially going to watch it, I was very, I guess, open-minded, hearing that it was basically going to be similar to like other kung fu movies, which I thought was really cool. And I actually really enjoyed this film. True, I did have some like problems with bits of the story, but I think overall, especially from what we had at Black Widow going into this movie was way, way more up my alley, and I think it did a pretty good job overall. I liked the main character's role. I liked his father's, his whole story arc. I liked the visual effects. I think overall we're done pretty well in this film too, especially for all of the different dynamic like lighting and stuff they did. I think, especially compared to Black Widow, this movie was way more interesting.
Oh yeah, I agree with Slothro. I'm actually really sad because I feel like this movie gets lumped in with these later phases of Marvel as like it just gets forgotten or just like lumped in as being part of like the bad phases, and so it's totally ignored. But that is such a disservice to this film. Like Slothro said, the effects looked great. I really enjoyed the action scenes in this movie. They were, like Slothro said, it was more similar to like a Jackie Chan kung fu type movie. And so it felt like something we hadn't seen in the MCU before. And it made it really enjoyable and it made it feel fresh and exciting. And actually, I was thinking about it and I was like, this is one I definitely need to go back and rewatch because I remember really enjoying it. I just have been so let down by Marvel that sometimes I forget about this movie, which makes me sad because I remember it was really good and I really liked it. And so I really hope that, you know, maybe this is good vibes out into the universe, that this movie kind of gets the love it deserves, or maybe gets a revisit from audiences, because I really think this is a great film, and I'm excited to see how they bring Shang-Chi and his character into the MCU moving forward, and I really hope they do give him another movie, because I thought this was a great run. I really enjoyed my time watching it. And so, after that really awesome action movie that was Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, we move into easily one of the most bafflingly bad not just Marvel movies, but movies I've seen in a long time. We've got Eternals here. So, Slathro, any opening thoughts on Eternals?
Not really. Just that I have not seen this movie. I have only seen the trailers of this movie, and I've seen clips of it. And all I can say is it has an ending similar to Batman versus Superman from a long time ago. And I'm very surprised. I was like, oh man, we got a second movie with the same ending. That's crazy. But I think, honestly, the next phase, there's a villain that's introduced that I was way more interested in, which is Galactus. Which we'll talk about in the next episode. But in this one, you don't really get a whole lot of familiar characters if you're not pretty versed in like Marvel comics. And so for me personally, just from seeing it from a glance, I just wasn't very into the movie in general.
Yeah, I don't blame you. We definitely start to suffer from. I know there's been a lot of talk about this, not just in Marvel movies, but in film in general right now. There's a desaturation of color. Everything feels very bland and uninteresting. Like I mentioned earlier, plasticky looking. There's not really a unique look to movies anymore or a distinct style. Those feel like few and far between. And I think we're starting to really see that in this phase at this time in Marvel with Eternals. The visuals are very bland, very boring. And after seeing the marketing for this film, I was actually pretty excited to see it. And I went opening weekend and it just devastated me because it was so bad. The plot was all over the place. I felt like there were too many characters to focus on. There wasn't enough runtime dedicated to the characters to actually make you connect with all of them. So that made some side characters just feel like cardboard props, or that they were just totally forgotten altogether. They were just like, oh, I hope they don't ask too many questions about them because they're not important to the story, so whatever. And the end of this movie, my good grief, dude, it's baffling what they chose to do at the end of this movie. You did kind of have the cool planet destroying baby Eternal coming out of the earth or whatever. But then they stop it from happening, and the Superman-esque character, I don't even remember his name, again, too many characters, he flies himself into the sun at the end as some sort of like penance, I think, for righting his wrongs or whatever. I was aghast. Mouth on the floor at the ending of this movie. Insert meme about I flew myself into the sun.
While you were gone, you missed 3 exams.
Really?
And 20 homework assignments.
Okay, I'm gonna be right back.
Then I flew myself right into the sun.
That's an old Vine, so I'm dating myself here. But that was all I could think of was I can't believe this guy flew himself into the sun. It pissed me off how bad this movie was.
His redemption arc was like, nah, I'm gonna just fly into the sun instead. I can't do these. I give up.
Exactly.
But yeah, I guess from that movie of interestingness, we go into a TV show of interestingness, which is the next TV show in the line of TV shows, which is Hawkeye. This was definitely a show. It came out around the holidays when this show released, and so a lot of it is more it's more themed around Christmas, which is kind of an interesting dynamic since a lot of these are kind of just based in like a generalized time frame. They don't really have like the holidays intertwined very much. And so having a kind of like a Christmas almost special, like a special TV show, was kind of interesting. This also introduced the new Hawkeye character. I can't remember her name, but she basically becomes Hawkeye's sidekick, and they go through a lot of different shenanigans in this TV show, and you actually get a little scene of Kingpin at the end of this, which is kind of cool, especially if you're very versed in Spider-Man. So this was the first live-action introduction to seeing Kingpin. And I think overall the show was all right, but I think like the prior things we've talked about, it just was bland. There wasn't very much to it. The characters probably weren't the most interesting characters you could watch on screen, especially from prior movies. And I think just overall, it's in that decline. And so I think it's overall just kind of another mid show.
Mid show. That's an accurate bundle of description for Hawkeye. Like Slothra said, just another one that I kind of felt like they were determined to make a show about any side character that people knew about or even remotely liked, just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what would stick. And the character Slothro mentioned earlier, Hawkeye's sidekick, is Kate Bishop, introduces her to join him in this kind of like Slothro said, Christmas themed adventure, which was interesting. And Kingpin, actually, the Kingpin I was familiar with was from the Spider-Man world, like Slothro mentioned, but actually this version of Kingpin, I believe, was the same live action introduction from Daredevil, the TV show.
Yes, the Netflix TV show.
Yeah, I believe they were trying to bring him over into the MCU, and this was how they were going to bridge that gap. So I thought Kingpin was really great. I mean, they took something I think that people really liked from the Daredevil TV show. I haven't seen it, but I've heard people really liked Kingpin in that TV show, so I think they were hoping that would get some good graces with audiences, and, you know, he was great. I liked him in this show. But overall, everything else about it was just fine. Nothing super memorable. Like Slothro, I'm pretty lukewarm about this, about Hawkeye.
Oh, I forgot. This had the LARPing stuff in it, too. That's the one that this show was. I forgot about that part.
I also forgot about that.
Where we get like a whole episode of Hawkeye just LARPing with a whole bunch of people, and it's just like an episode dedicated to LARPing. Oh,
shout out to our friends in the LARPing community. It's a pretty awesome hobby. Just very interesting that they decided to throw it into a Marvel TV show about Hawkeye. But, you know, whatever works, I guess. And moving right along in here to my favorite Spider-Man movie that has been part of the Tom Holland introduction to the MCU. I mentioned that previously on a Ghastly Ghostbird episode, that Spider-Man No Way Home is easily my favorite of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. So Slothro, how did you feel about this film?
This is my other favorite film of this phase. I enjoy this film a lot. If you grew up, like you said, post-mortem, with watching the prior Spider-Man trilogy movies and kind of getting introduced into Tom Holland, and even watching the early 2010 Spider-Man movies with, I forgot the actor's name.
Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire, yes. You get to see all of these characters that you've kind of seen throughout all these trilogies culminate into one film. And I think it just did a really good job of kind of bringing those characters into the same scene and being able to tell a different story with it, but the same story that we know from Spider-Man, which I think it did really, really well. Not to mention...
And sorry, Slothro, to interrupt you. You were thinking of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. Spider-Man was the other.
Yes, Andrew Garfield.
Spidey
boy. It was just cool seeing, like, one villain from another universe interacting with, like, Tom Holland's Spider-Man and his universe, and the different dynamics between the two. And I liked just the unique story beats of, like, redemption arcs for these villains. I think it was done really, really well, especially for Dr. Octavius, or Doc Ock. I think they did a really good job with his writing. He was just a very interesting character in that whole movie. And even the ending, like, all the fighting was cool. The introduction to Doctor Strange into it, and his whole mix with being able to help erase the memory of, like, people knowing who Spider-Man is. It all plays a really interesting role. And getting to see all of them come together and, like, mourn and kind of grow together by the end of the film. And seeing Tom Holland be able to grow from this whole experience, even having his girlfriend forget who he is. It just was a very, very welcoming story that was it filled a market of staleness that we had for a while up until this point. So I personally really enjoyed this movie.
I second everything you said. I, for sure, loved this film. It's really, really great. There's not much for me to pick apart here. Doc Ock as a kid was one of my favorite villains and actually kickstarted my love of villain-type characters. I love that they tied the multiverse concept in. It kind of felt awkward in previous projects that they were trying to introduce the multiverse concept, but man, they really just nailed it, bringing in the other Spider-Man and the villains and everybody working together. And Green Goblin.
Harry tells me you're quite the science whiz. You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Is, I mean, menacing as all hell, dude. Huge consequences were brought to the world of Tom Holland's Spider-Man through Green Goblin, and this movie was pretty dark at times because of his character, but he also didn't drag it down, where it was still a Spider-Man movie. It's got its lows and its highs, and because of that, the highs feel really high and the lows feel really low, and it's just emotionally engaging. And I just really had a good time with this movie. I believed I saw it 2 or 3 times in theaters. It was just a great time. And the financial budget would back up that audiences were really wanting this kind of Marvel movie that made them feel excited again. So yeah, big fan of No Way Home.
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of leads, unfortunately, into another very unfortunate movie for me personally, which is Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. For someone who enjoyed the first Doctor Strange, this was a fart in the wind, or as Venom says in his first movie, like a turd in the wind. For me personally, I think visual-wise, this movie did an alright job, but story-wise, it was just all over the place, and it kind of, I don't know, overall, I feel like it backpedaled a lot of stuff that had been built up before, and it just wasn't very entertaining. The few cool parts that they try to do of like pulling on the multiversal part, so trying to introduce the X-Men through Professor X and the Fantastic Four, they kind of just shoehorn them in, and I don't know, it was just, they try to go like a horror route with this, and it was a movie of a lot of different ideas that it was like trying to blend like cereal and burgers and soda all together and trying to make it work with milk, and it doesn't work. It's just a pile of mush, and you're like, there was something here, there was an idea, but it was not very, very well executed. So I think this movie was not very good.
That's funny. I actually respectfully disagree with Slothro. I do think all of his criticisms, though, are very valid. The meshing of different ideas and themes and genres all clashing together in this movie. I mean, yeah, I think Slothro's critiques are totally valid, but I just had a fun time with this. I don't know what it was. Wanda's character flip at the beginning definitely made no sense. There was definitely some character growth or plot missing there. But I guess if you can roll with that at the very beginning, I liked the horror vibes. They kept the trippy visuals that are in the first Doctor Strange. I liked America Chavez's character, so I hope they actually figure out a way to better utilize that character moving forwards. But who knows? Marvel's writing has, of course, been all over the place, as we are all painfully aware of at times. Also, I actually really enjoyed the world of the Fantastic Four just getting obliterated by Wanda. That was such an unexpected and dark turn for me that, I don't know, just really worked. I don't know. I appreciated what they tried to do with this film, even though it definitely is not perfect, even close in any sense of the word. And, Benedict Cumberbatch, great as always as Doctor Strange. So I just had a fun time with the Multiverse of Madness. But Slothro's criticisms 100% make sense.
And I think that's cool. A lot of the points you brought up too make a lot of sense. There were good parts of this movie. I did find it cool that Jim from The Office is the one who played Mr. Fantastic. I thought he did a good job.
Yeah.
And I do like the horror vibes. Like, I like the vibe they try to go with Wanda. It just didn't mesh for me at first. And so I would say I respect your takes on this movie as well. It was a very interesting movie, to say the least. But leading into this one was Thor: Love and Thunder. So after this one, we got another one. This one has no, it's not Namor. That's a different movie. This has Christian Bale from the Batman movies as the villain. I forgot what the villain's name is.
Gore?
Gore, yes. He's a very prominent villain in the comics. And so seeing him put to screen was interesting. I don't think they did the the most optimum job, because he's like a humanoid alien. They definitely took some creative liberties with it, but I think visually there were some parts visually that were good and some parts that suffered from the Black Widow kind of scenario. And I think a part of it as well is, honestly, I don't think they had enough time to actually produce the visual effects all the way in some of these movies, or they weren't given enough time to polish them. And I think this movie was one of the ones that suffered from that the most, at least in terms of some of its visuals. It just didn't really get a whole lot of chance to cook in the visual effects department.
Yeah, I know that there was a lot of struggle with visual effects artists being overworked, which is, it's always going to make it difficult to have the most polished look. And of course, that's on the executives making those decisions because at this point, Disney owning and the MCU was really pushing for quantity over quality. And you really start to see that, especially with Thor Love and Thunder. It's funny, I mentioned earlier that Thor the Dark World was the most unpopular Thor movie. I think I was wrong because this movie left my consciousness and then I remembered people hate this movie and I don't blame them. I'm not a fan of it either. It felt like they dialed up things from Thor Ragnarok and then but it's not the right things. It feels like it throws the balance out of whack. And this movie was so over the top and there was way too much of that Marvel comedy without any like more balance of like heart and story to it. It definitely needed to be more grounded. And, I do love Christian Bale's villain as, him playing Gore. I mean, he fully commits to any role he does, and that's true again in this film. And for me, he was easily the best and my favorite part. But, the plot's not super memorable, and so I really just hope they can do a better balance in the future Thor films, because yikeroonies, I did not think this was a very good movie.
I don't blame you.
And closing out here, phase 4, our last property we're talking about is Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And, I have to give this movie credit because I figured following up Black Panther, especially after the passing of Chadwick Boseman, I figured it would be an impossible task to follow that movie up. And it seems that my fears were proven correct. I think this story and this movie is fine. But what do you think, Slothro?
I'm kind of in a similar vein. I think it's all right. I really enjoyed the first Black Panther movie, and so coming into this one, I was kind of expecting it to be very similar in terms of the enjoyment. But I found it it was just kind of bland. It just, like, they didn't do, like, they had the villain Namor. It felt like they took, like, different story beats from other movies. So, like, Namor, if people know this movie, it's Atlantis from Disney back in the day. It's almost like they took bits and parts of that story dynamic and, like, Frankensteined together their own, like, movie into this one. And so there were parts of it that were visually very interesting. And I definitely saw story beats that could have been very, very engaging. But I just think it's just mid. It's just done very mid.
I agreed 100% here. I think that the biggest struggle of this movie is Black Panther's so memorable. I mean, the villain in the first Black Panther is just a standout. I mean, Killmonger is easily one of the best in the MCU ever. I don't really know how they could have followed that up, to be honest, especially. And then they have Thanos, which is also a great villain. And so Namor definitely felt like a downgrade. And so I think it just made this movie feel like a bigger disappointment than it probably was because it was a sequel to one of the best Marvel movies and just movies in general ever made. And so, it's not a bad movie, but it's definitely no way near as good as the first one. And I was just kind of left the theater disappointed, but I kind of feel bad because I feel like following up the first one was an impossible task. So any other thoughts, Lothro, before we close out the video?
Not in particular, just kind of, it's unfortunate that like I said at the beginning, Phase 3 for me personally, I feel like was the highlight of Marvel, and there is some diamonds in the rough to find in these phases that were in Phase 4 and Phase 5, and even going up into Phase 6. But it isn't as, I guess it's like an artist perspective. There's not a whole lot of art to be found or like creative art, like Postmortem said. In a lot of this, you have to kind of pick through it in order to find it, which was definitely not always the case in the prior phases. So if that's something that you enjoy doing, to just go watch specific movies, then like Postmortem and I said, there's some pretty good gems in Phase 4 that you can go and watch and have a fun time with. And if you enjoy the other properties as well, then more power to you. I think that there's a lot to like in any of these properties. Just in my perspective, at least, and I'm sure Postmortem is similar in the perspective. This phase was just kind of, it just is not going to hit as high as something that Phase 3 provided. So
yeah, agreed. I think when it's coming off of Phase 3, it's such a high and it's so great and memorable and historic. It's really hard to follow it up. And then they did a kind of company shift where they went from quantity over quality. So they just wanted to pump as much stuff out. And like Slothro said, your art suffers if you're not actually taking the time to go through the creative process. And when you're rushing people, there are just parts of art that cannot be rushed. And if they are, you're going to see it. And unfortunately for Marvel, they've really had to pay the price for the C-suite decisions. And so I hope that they have learned from Phase 4 and Phase 5 as we start to go forward into the next phases, that audiences really want the stories and they want the characters that they loved and the elements that they really enjoyed from Phase 3 brought into the future. And so I think, I'm always holding out hope that Marvel will be able to figure out how to do that. But yeah, there's definitely some really great ones in here. Like we always do in these videos, I think that my favorites are easily Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings and Spider-Man No Way Home. I think that's easy winners for me. But what about you, Slothro?
Mine are the exact same. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings and Spider-Man No Way Home are my favorites in this whole phase.
So yes, those are the ones that we would recommend. But we really appreciate you guys tuning in to listen to us talk about Marvel once again this week. Next week will be our second to last Marvel video. Just for a little bit of sneak peek, we'll be doing Phase 5 and up to where we are now in Phase 6 next week. And then the following week is a Marvel character ranking video. So get excited for those. But we are so glad that we got to join you all today. Let us know in the comments, like Slothro said, your thoughts on these movies. Do you agree with us, disagree with us on any of our thoughts? But I am Postmortem Nightshade. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Postmortem Nightshade doing movie review content. And Slothro, where can they find you?
You guys can pop over and find me over on YouTube. So definitely go check out Postmortem's movie reviews. She does them all the time, and she does some really good reviews on a lot of well-known movies and also maybe movies that you don't know. So definitely go check out a lot of her movie reviews.
Thanks, Slothro. I love the plug, so I'm offering one back. We love to plug each other on this channel. Slothro has some amazing video game content. If you guys are excited for the new Resident Evil game, get excited for Slothro's playthrough. And of course, I'm always going to plug the sorry, wrong phrase. I'm always going to plug the Slime Rancher videos because they are my favorite. But thank you everyone so much for tuning in, and we will see you all next week. Bye!
Bye!